Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, and today we're going to be reviewing the new Into the Inklands Amber and Emerald deck list. But first, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I do appreciate it. And we are running a giveaway right now. That's right, you can actually win the deck that I will be reviewing in this video. We need to get to 1,000 subscribers, and this video needs to get to 100 likes. So to enter, all you have to do is be subscribed to the channel, hit that like button, and then leave a comment down in the comment section below with your like number. We also have a video up right here for the other video, for the other starter deck, if you want to get into that drawing as well. We're going to be looking at the actual full deck list today, breaking down the cards and their abilities. We're also going to be going over the cards that I would look at either taking out or upgrading if you're looking at participating in the starter deck challenge. And then finally at the end, giving you my thoughts on the starter decks in general. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the deck list. All right, taking a look at the cards in the deck here. First, we're going to look at the cost curve. Definitely front-loaded for the low end, but as you can see, it does actually have a bit of a late game on here as well. So ideally, you can kind of ramp into those high-end cards on curve, which is very, very nice. I do want to point out the disparity in the inkable versus the uninkable cards. On the other deck, we were looking at 13 uninkables, so we have less than half of that in this deck as well. So already like a huge advantage over the other starter deck and like a starter deck challenge type scenario. 6 is a much more manageable number. You're not going to find yourself really running out of options to ink in a lot of scenarios at 6, and gives you some opportunity that if you open something that's really good and uninkable, you can probably still work it into the list. Now, taking a look at the actual cards in the deck, we've got 3 copies of Kita, your kind of vanilla 2/2 for 1, great stat line here. Our first uninkable in the other 1-drop spot being Pluto, and this one's very, very solid. We do have the 7-drop Pluto that can also shift off of this one, but early in the game, if they don't have somebody to challenge him, he does still generate 1 lore, but he has this ability, Good Dog, which means he can come in and put you ahead of curve whichever turn you need him to. If they have an ability to challenge Pluto and get rid of him, you don't have to use the ability. You can keep him back for that pivotal turn where it'll put you ahead on curve. Keep in mind, too, that also does reduce shift costs. So if you do have the 7-drop Pluto in your hand, you can reduce his shift from 5 all the way down to 4 with this guy. Very, very good card that you're going to want to see a lot of times in these matches. It's going to make this higher end of your curve, these 5, 6, and 7 drops, much more manageable because you'll have this ability to reduce their cost even on a 1-drop here. Next up, we have 5 of the Dalmatian puppies here, and we're probably going to get 1 of each of the artwork. I don't know if that's been officially confirmed or not, but I would assume we'll get 1 of each of the artwork in there. Now, this stat line in limited format is absolutely fantastic, so the fact that they loaded us up on them is great as well. A 2/3 for 2 with 1 lore generation and being inkable is almost an auto-include in every limited format that you can get to, whether it be draft, sealed, or in these starter deck challenges. So the fact that you just get 5 dumped into your deck is fantastic with these cards here. And again, if you're just a collector and you're wanting 1 of each of the artwork, you'll probably get 1 of each in this starter deck as well. Also in the 2-drop spot, we have Windy Darling. This card is absolutely fantastic. A 2-drop with 3 willpower is going to be very hard for your opponent to deal with in 1 exchange early in the game. And the fact that she generates 2 lore on top of that is fantastic. If this is kind of a vanilla stat line that we can expect in the future, I'm very excited for this. For like aggressive decks, this is fantastic because traditionally you're looking at something with like 2 willpower, 1 strength, and like Flynn Rider, who has an ability, or LeFou, who sort of has an ability. And this one actually bumping up to that 3 willpower is absolutely huge in that format because it's going to survive the 2/2s for 1s. It's going to survive the 2/3s for 2s over here. So not until they get to like the challenger drop type characters in the 1 and 2 drop spot, or like your kind of 2-drop 3/3s with drawbacks like your Madam Mims or your or your Della Duck out of the other starter deck, which have the ability to take care of her on turn 2, but there's usually some kind of drawback with it, either bouncing a character or just having Reckless on a character to be able to deal with that 3 willpower. Very, very good card, and we do get 3 copies of it in this deck. Then we have Helga Sinclair in the 2-drop spot. Not crazy about this card in Limited. She is a 2/1, 1 lore generator for 2, which is pretty understated. With ability, nothing personal. When this character is challenged and banished, banish the challenging character. So she's always going to take a character with her when she's challenged and banished. However, pretty much any character is going to be able to take care of her in that challenge. So unless they only have a big character in play, she really doesn't offer herself any protection. Now, if she had the ability to also challenge, or maybe had was a 2-3 stat line instead of a 2-1 stat line, I could see maybe being a little bit higher up on my list. But honestly, she doesn't have much going for her. 1 lore generation. If they do have a big character in play, they can just ignore her as well. So just not a lot there. Reckless characters have to challenge her, so you do have that going for you. But most of the reckless characters are going to get banished by the 2 strength anyway, so not a lot of upside with that either, but she's inkable, so not the worst card. Moving on to our 3-drops, we have Pongo, is a 3/2 for 3, 1 lore generation, and inkable. Not great stats for that cost, but his ability, Twilight Bark. Once per turn, you may pay 2 ink to reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. So we have card draw on our 3-drop. We have card draw that doesn't require him to exert himself, so he's not vulnerable, which is absolutely fantastic. As the deck is out of the box, he has an 80% chance to hit a character card off of the top. And honestly, if you're digging for character cards and you whiff on it, it's going to ship that card to the bottom of your deck as well. So not even a kind of a win-lose situation, but kind of like a win and a win more situation. You're either going to draw it, or you're going to be one step closer to getting another character, which in limited play is definitely what you're going to be digging for. And in a constructed play, he's probably going to have almost 100% hit rate. Anyways, a really big fan of this card in general. He's a super rare, should be the foil in the deck as well. So excited that he is in the pre-constructed decks, because I am anxious to test with this Pongo build already. Then we're going into our 3-drops. We've got Roly the Hungry Pup. He is a 3/3, 1 lore generator for 3, who is inkable. Again, average stat line. He does have support, though, which is nice. At 3, he's not going to be kind of bullied at that spot with those stat lines, so it is nice that he can kind of turn sideways, pump something up to 6 attack, pump something up 3 on the attack, and still kind of be an issue if they're wanting to take him out afterwards. I do like that. Normally when you see support strapped onto one of these characters, they really drop down their willpower, so they are a little bit more vulnerable to an opponent swinging back onto them. But he's pretty average stat line. I think an average stat line is the 3/4 for 3, so 1 less willpower to have the ability to throw 3 strength around is pretty nice. Next up is Flotsam. He's a 3-drop 5/2 with 1 lore generation and the ability repair. Your characters named Jetsam get +3 strength. It's wild to me that the other starter deck has kind of Maui in this spot, which is a 5/2 uninkable for 3 who has Reckless. Just clearly this is an upgrade to him in every way, and still not a fantastic card. Now obviously if you have Jetsam in play, having him also have 5 strength is very nice. This is probably just going to be a character that you hold back for challenges, though, as he gets taken out very easily by the 1-drops that people are playing. So you're not going to really be questing with him very often. He's kind of a quasi removal spell, pretty on par with the 3-drop Scar from set 1. A little bit lower willpower, but has an ability to make up for it. We do have Horus and Jasper in the deck from set 1. Not a huge fan of Horus. I definitely prefer the reversed stats, the 3/4s for 3s, as the survivability increases the chance that he'll be able to challenge 2 characters versus being able to challenge up slightly in that scenario. So not a huge fan of the Horus. The Jasper, on the other hand, though, is one of the best 3-drops in Emerald, and the fact that you get 2 of them in your limited card pool as well is very strong. 4 willpower, very hard to deal with this early on in the game. He's going to be able to shut off their quester the following turn while questing himself. So you get to advance your win condition, slow your opponent's win condition, and kind of doubly slow it because they're probably going to have to challenge with 2 characters just to make sure you don't do it the following turn as well. We do have Jetsam here in the 3-drop spot as well. Big fan of Jetsam, actually. 2 lore generator on 3. Again, only 2 willpower, so not crazy. So nothing crazy there. He does have ward, though, so they are going to have to challenge him to take him off the field. And if you do have Flotsam out, he is going to be a 5/2 that they are going to want to challenge because that 2 lore generation can get out of hand very quickly. Much bigger fan of the Jetsam than I am the Flotsam. And then obviously, if you're looking at constructed play, you can add the extra Flotsam and Jetsams from set 1 Amethyst as well. That takes us to Kit Cloud Kicker here. This guy is phenomenal in limited play, may even see some constructed play. 3-drop, 2/2, 1 lore generation. He is inkable. Again, stats are not good for a 3-drop, but this sky surfing ability here, when you play this character, you may return chosen opposing character with 2 strength or less to that player's hand. So while he's a little understated, he is going to bounce a lot of characters early on in the game. A very good tempo play, especially in this deck. The number of targets that he's going to have in limited are very high because your opponents are going to want to curve out on a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop, and he's going to be able to return most likely 1 to 2, possibly even 3 choices on your turn 3 to your opponent's hand. And then again, he is going to be able to quest decently statted there. And if you've bounced their kind of biggest challenger back, they're kind of going to be forced to either challenge with a suboptimal challenge the following turn, or just ignore him and you'll get to quest with him or challenge with him again the following turn. And then we've got our Wildcat in the 3-drop spot. He's a 2/3, 1 lore generator for 3, so not great stats. He does have evasive and a little bit higher willpower than some of the other evasives that we see in the starter decks this time around. So, I mean, he does have some survivability. Again, I'm not a huge fan of evasive characters with 1 lore generation, except in the fact that they can challenge. So the fact that he's a little understated in the strength doesn't make me like him a whole lot. However, he does have this ability, Disassemble, where he can just banish a chosen item as well. Now, if you're playing the mirror on the starter decks, it's really not going to be applicable, but if your opponent is playing the Ruby Sapphire deck, they do have a lot of items where this ability could come into effect. And that takes us to our 4-drop, Lucky, the 15th puppy. He is a 4-drop uninkable 2/3, 1 lore generator. Again, stats are terrible for 4-drop, especially the uninkable variety, but he does have 2 abilities that are absolutely insane in any play, really, but especially in limited play. He can exert himself to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and you may put each character card with cost 2 or less into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this has like 15 targets right out of the gate that you can pull out of your top 3 cards. So if you are needing to get more of a board presence, because clearly we're not going to be running into any sweepers in a starter deck challenge, then he's got 3 opportunities to pull one of the 15 targets that this guy can get out of the deck and adds any of them if you have multiples in those 3 cards to your hand. The second ability, though, is probably what you're going to want to use him more often than not for. It's this Puppy Love. Whenever this character quests, if you have 4 or more other characters in play, your other characters get +1 lore generation this turn. So if you have him and 3 other characters in play, him questing is going to add a minimum of 3 lore to your turn that turn, which is going to make for some absolutely huge swings on turns. There's relatively little removal in the starter deck challenges, so the fact that he can just kind of sit back and then perform either one of these abilities, he's probably only going to get the ability off once, unless you have a big bodyguard down to protect him, which will make this guy even better. But once, honestly, is probably going to be enough for either of these abilities to go off. Next up, we have Patch, the Intimidating Pup. He's a 4-drop, 3/4, 1 lore generator. Again, a little understated for the cost, but they do slap on an ability to make up for it. He does have the ability to exert himself to give chosen character -2 strength until the start of your next turn. If you are challenging, this can help that survivability. The deck definitely has some big willpower characters, so being able to challenge repetitively over and over again. For example, if you have your Horus out, one of his downsides is he's only got 3 willpower to survive, but if you're giving characters -2 strength before challenging with Horus, that can make it to where he can challenge multiple characters or take out multiple bigger threats with one character. So nice that this is a reusable ability, and he's got a decent enough stat line to help him survive after using it the first time, even if your opponents are going to be targeting him to make sure challenges are more favorable going forward. Then we get to Tinkerbell, probably our first bad card in this deck, and arguably maybe the only bad card in this deck, but she is a 4-drop uninkable with absolutely abysmal stats. She is a 1/4, 1 lore generator, which is just terrible for an uninkable 4-drop. She does have an ability to make a new friend. When you play this character, you can look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a character card and put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So she does replace herself, but unfortunately, the fact that she's just so bad stat-wise, that's really of no benefit. Like, she could cost 1 and just not have this ability here, and I don't think we would still care. She's just barely better than the 1/3s that we already have that are inkable at the 1-drop spot. So the fact that she is 4 and uninkable and simply just replaces herself in a hand, I just don't think this card is any good, and definitely one of the cards I would target to remove from the list. Gives us 3 copies of Cubby in that 4-drop spot, though, who is inkable at a 3/5. So nice stat line for the 4. 1 lore generation, but the big ability here is the bear. Whenever this character moves to a location, he gets 3 strength this turn. So the deck is definitely got some good locations in it. All require 1 to move to them. So by paying 1 and moving this die to a location, you could be challenging for 6 with a 4-drop, which is absolutely huge. We have that 5 willpower too, which is going to make him survive most challenges, especially if you combine that with a patch to lower their strength 2 on that front end too. This guy can absolutely just be a huge board controlling monster. And we do get 3 of those in this deck as well. So just make sure that you're protecting those locations for cards like this ability. Then we got Peter Pan here. He's a 4-drop, 3/3, 1 lore generator. Again, kind of understated. Now, he does have this ability. I came to listen to the stories. Once per turn, when this character moves to a location, gain lore equal to that location's lore value. This ability is pretty good. Unfortunately, out of the box, we only have 1 lore generation locations. So if you get 1 in your extra pack, if you are doing the starter deck challenge, this guy becomes much better. Being able to pay 1 basically, or 2 depending on the location you get, to move around and gain 1 lore every turn is very nice. Obviously, we would want to get more than 1 lore, as you're going to have multiple locations to activate him every turn anyways, because while he's at a location, you can't move him to that same location again. So while it's a good ability, I don't know in the limited format here that it's worth the trade stat off. Now, obviously, he's inkable and has the ability to generate lore without questing, so probably good enough to stay in the deck, but definitely not realizing this card's full potential in a deck that just has a limited number of locations and all only generating 1 lore. Nani right here in the 5-drop spot is our first bodyguard, and man, what a bodyguard. At 5 inkable, she's a 3/6/2 lore generator, which is a crazy stat line. And the fact that she has bodyguard while she's generating 2 lore, so she's advancing your win condition while protecting your characters with a 6 willpower, and no slouch on the front end either. Like, I mean, she is about the same stat line as Maximus, but generates 2 lore where Maximus only generates 1. Now, Maximus does have support, which can lead into some interesting challenges and whatnot, but the fact that this deck has so many kind of keystone characters in here that are going to be kind of very high utility characters, and they have 2 copies of this really good Bodyguard in here as well. I really like this card, and it's definitely one of the kind of the MVPs of this deck. Following up with that, we have our other 5-drop Don Carnage. He's a 4/4, 2 lore generating evasive character. I think he's the only 2 lore evasive character out of both decks. We do have Moana in the Ruby Sapphire, who's same stat line, but only 1 lore generating over here. So very, very solid. Now, it's important to know, too, that I think Moana is the only one that can challenge him directly out of the 2 decks as well with the evasive characters. So very, very good that he is a 4/4, just a beat stick, really, of an evasive lore generator. 2 lore generation is kind of the secret sauce for evasive characters. Much quicker clock to put your opponent on an evasive character than the 1 lore ones, and I would always prioritize a 2 or 3, obviously, lore generator over the 1 lore generation evasive characters. Again, for me personally, 1 lore generating evasive characters are more of a removal option for other evasive characters to me than they are an actual win condition due to their evasive ability. The hits don't stop. We've got our 6-drop Robin Hood here. He's a 4/5, 4/6 with 4 lore generation. So not only does this guy put your opponent on a very short clock, he does have a decent enough stat line that can make him difficult to deal with in a single challenge on your opponent's turn. So he may be able to survive a second activation on his own. But this deck actually has a number of ways to protect him, too, with 3 separate bodyguards in this deck that can protect him, and the ability to challenge aggressively into other characters to keep the board somewhat clear from characters that may be able to do it. This is such a huge amount of lore on this turn that it's just crazy to me that we got it on like just a generic rare for limited. This is an absolute bomb in this deck, and will close out and catch up games that you had no reason winning at all, because again, like, the 4 lore generation on 1 character is just absolutely crazy. If you get this down, you really have like Dragonfire. The 2 copies of Dragonfire in the other starter deck are really the only things you have to worry about, even if he only gets to activate once. But if you can follow him up with, like, say, the 7-drop Pluto over here, I can't imagine very many games where you will lose those games. Talking about our 7-drop Pluto over here, he is a 3/8 2 lore generator for 7. He is inkable, does have shift 5. We do have 3 of the 1-drop Plutos in there as shift targets for him, so it shouldn't be outside of the realm of reason to get him down for 5 or even 4 if you have the Pluto activated. He does have the ability Bodyguard, which again benefits the fact that if you shift him onto a Pluto that has already been activated for the turn, that he will already be exerted, so you don't have to really worry about the negative drawback of activating the 1-drop Pluto. And has the ability Guard Dog. At the start of your turn, remove up to 3 damage from this character. He has 8 willpower, which is a lot of willpower to deal with in a single turn, and your opponents are really going to have to deal with him in a single turn, because if they do 6 damage to this guy and you ready, now he's already down to 3, back up to 5 willpower. Depending on what your board state is, they can just leave him up for 1 turn and he'll be fully healed the following turn, which is just absolutely insane. Removing 3 damage a turn from himself is a lot, especially on a character with such high survivability already built into the card. This is just an absolute beat stick for a limited format where targeted removal spells are so limited. Again, you have 2 cards right here that out of the box can only be addressed by 1 card that has 2 copies of it in the other starter deck, which is just a huge mountain to climb if you're able to get these down before your opponent can. And then just to follow it up, we get a vanilla 7-drop Starky over here, who's a 6/6 3 lore generator. Again, with Pluto, we can get him down on turn 6 ahead of curve. 7 is kind of that hard threshold to hit in limited. This deck does have more draw than an average limited deck, though, so it won't be as challenging, but being able to shave this off to 6 does make a big difference. And honestly, a 6/6 3 lore generator is a lot for your opponent to deal with. as again, he's going to be able to close out games very, very quickly with that 3 lore generating, and his body is not going to be easy for most decks to deal with favorably. All right, that takes us into our actions. Both of these are reprints from set 2. We've got Improvise as a 3 of. Chosen character gets +1 strength, draw a card, and Hypnotize. Each opponent chooses and discards a card, draws a card. Now, by themselves, these effects on these cards are not going to be very impactful. However, they all cycle and serve the purpose of thinning your deck. They are all inkable, so they're never going to be a dead card in your hand. But effectively, with these 5 cards, you will be playing a 55-card deck. The effect could come into... the effect could make a difference depending on the scenario. +1 strength could be enough to make a favorable or an unfavorable trade favorable. And if your opponent has, 1 or 2 cards left in their hand, playing a Hypnotize on them definitely could be a detriment to them. But realistically, this one just is a straight replace itself for 1. This one is a +1 card for 3 because your opponent is going to have to discard a card just like you're having to play the Hypnotize, and then you'll get to draw a card. So you will be +1 card on this one, where this one is just getting you 1 card deeper in your deck. We also have 2 songs, Strike a Good Match, which, guess what it does? It also draws 2 cards, then chooses and discard 1 card. So it's still going to get you a replacement for playing the card here, which you can sing for free, but it is going to get you 2 cards deeper into your deck. Again, it's just wild to me when you compare the 2 decks side by side, how much draw that they put into a Ruby Amber list. I mean, it's basically like every card just about that draws a card in those 2 colors is in this deck. So just a phenomenal amount of draw to cycle through your deck and get you closer to your 7-drop, Pluto, or your 6-drop Robin Hoods. And then we have our 5 locations, which are very good tempo-wise. These all drop on turn 1, and then every turn after that is going to generate 1 lore for each of these locations. They're basically identical in that it takes 1 to move to these locations, so to get any of those effects that you need that we talked about from these locations, it's relatively inexpensive to move there. And your opponent's really going to have to deal with them because of the fact that they're going to be generating passive lore. Also, they're going to be triggering effects on some of the Lost Boys and Peter Pan, so your opponent's not going to be able to ignore them. So they are a nice little tempo piece in the deck in and of itself. And again, worst case scenario, they are inkable. If you draw them late game where your opponent's got a big body presence already that's just going to be able to take care of it if they need to, then maybe you just need to ink it to get to your following locations. But either way, these are some of I think the most playable locations that we have is the 1-drop ones that have the 4 willpower just for that 1 lore generation, because this forces your opponent to kind of take tempo away from their game plan to deal with them, or else you're just going to be accumulating 5, 6, 7 lore over the course of the game if they just let these go unanswered. So now getting into the cards that I would recommend taking out or upgrading in the list. And as you can see right out of the gates, we only have 5 cards really on this list. So if you're playing in a starter deck challenge, you're not going to have to rely too heavily on the 1 extra pack to really get this deck where it needs to be. Now, if you are looking to upgrade it for more competitive play, there are obviously a lot of cards that you can add and upgrade in the deck. And if you have questions on that specifically, feel free to ask down in the comment section below. The first card on the list is the Helga Sinclair. As I mentioned before, she's really just not very good stats for a 2-drop character. I mean, I would rather just replace her with another like 2/3 for 2 if we can, or even like a 3/3 2 lore generator if we had something like that. Something with 2 lore generation or posed some kind of ability to actually be able to challenge the board effectively for its cost. You're really just relying on your opponent being in a bad board state and being forced to challenge your 1 lore generator. So she's just not going to do what you want her to do most times. Again, she's inkable, so if you can't find a replacement for her, at the very least, just know that you'll always have her to be able to add to ink. Horus, very similar. He is inkable, so not a terrible pull at any point in time. His stats are not quite what I would like them to be at for that 3-drop spot. Like I said, I would probably try to upgrade him at the minimum to a 3/4 for 3 if we can. He doesn't really have any synergy with any other cards in the deck. Now, obviously, if we can upgrade him somewhere down the road, like a 2-lore generator, or even, you know, an evasive, challenging type character, very minimal upgrades. But obviously, if you get something crazy good in your pack to upgrade him with, this is just another card that just, again, isn't going to do what you want it to do a lot of times. At 3, it is going to be able to trade and take out a lot of characters, but we do have a lot of like 5/2s that are in both decks, so you don't really need a whole lot of strength to challenge effectively. And if you do, this 4 is probably not going to be what you need it to be anyways. And then Tinkerbell, as we mentioned, she's just a bad card in the deck, and being uninkable, this will free up some uninkable space for you if you did get some good uninkable cards out of your pack, but ultimately she just doesn't do enough for her stat line. At 4, the fact that she doesn't have either 2-lore, evasive, the ability to challenge evasive, nothing. I mean, she's basically a vanilla character that should get you the best character in your top 4 cards into your hand. Just isn't worth keeping in the deck. This is absolutely the first card I would prioritize taking out of the deck. Replacing it with anything inkable would be an upgrade, and in my opinion, obviously getting better stats out of a character would be ideal. But honestly, not too hard to make an improvement over this kind of card effect in the deck. I think this probably had different stats whenever they were testing it and felt too good, and they ended up dropping it down and have just kind of created a card that really isn't going to do anything right now. Maybe, you know, someday in the future, if there's just a deck with a combo piece that you really just aggressively have to dig for, this card could see some play. But outside of that, I just can't imagine this card sees any play, limited and or otherwise. So there you guys have it. There is the deck breakdown, as well as some cards to upgrade or take out if you are participating in the starter deck challenges. Now, usually these starter decks are a little bit more comparable than they are this time. I do feel like there is a pretty overwhelming power disparity for the Amber and Emerald deck compared to the Ruby Amethyst. So keep that in mind if you are participating in a starter deck challenge as you go into those events. If you do have any other questions or comments, I would love to hear them down in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, Hobby Hero out.